To unpack the real issues affecting the Tasman nations, this is Tasman Talk, jointly produced by the Unshackled.net and rightminds.nz. Now here's Tim Wilms in Australia and Dewey DeBoer in New Zealand.
Hello everyone and welcome to the return of Tasman Talk after 3 weeks. It is Friday the 6th of November 2020. I'm Tim Wilms here in coronavirus-free Melbourne now.
We've been doing coronavirus shows since February or March, so it's good to finally have a coronavirus-free show. What a good start. My name is Dewey DeBoer, and I'm here in Auckland, and I am the editor of Right Minds NZ, and we are streaming live on both the Unshackled channel on YouTube and on the Right Minds channel on YouTube as well, and it is good to see everybody in the chat already.
Yes. Yeah, because it's a long time since we've done a show, because you weren't just covering the election for Right Minds and Tasman Talk. Our last show was the election night stream. You're also a candidate for the new Conservative Party, which I'll get your assessment of their result.
We got 1.5% of the vote, which was sort of in line with the polling. So in some ways, slightly expected perhaps, but a bit disappointed, because obviously we were hoping to do much better than that. But for basically a first time, it's not the end of the world. Let's put it. It's something to build on, and we can take 1.5% and we can look at what went wrong and what we can do better next time, and we'll give it another shot in 3 years.
I've just put up the totals here, because today you had what are termed the special votes come in, and well, they are special because they come from handicapped voters who vote for Labor and the Greens, which has bumped up Labor at the expense of the National Party.
Yes, often the Greens actually pick up a seat off the specials. If people can cast their minds back to the election night show, we had actually the ACT Party finish up ahead of the Greens, just by a little bit. And actually, same thing, New Conservatives was actually ahead of the Opportunities Party down there. But on the back of the special votes, the left always does better, because it's all of the people who have fled New Zealand to go and live in, for instance, Australia, a very popular destination for New Zealanders, to enjoy the higher wages and the lower taxes and the greater economic freedom. And of course, they live in countries like that, and they go and vote for left-wing parties in New Zealand to make sure that we don't get any of those benefits. So instead of the Green Party picking up an actual seat, though, we had the Labour Party pick one off national, and we had actually the Māori Party pick one off national. So the Māori Party got one extra seat, one list seat, and also the Labour Party actually picked up an electorate. So the National Party lost 3 more electorates off the special votes, but they only lost enough of the party vote to lose 2 seats in total. So it makes sense of New Zealand's elections, sort of the way that MMP works, where it's sort of the party vote is the overall makeup of Parliament, but the electorate seats get first dibs, basically. So even though the Labour Party picked up an extra seat, it was or picked up 3 extra seats. It only got 1 extra MP off the list, and I think 2 of the MPs who won their seats were already high on the list. So there's only 1 real newcomer there for the Labour Party, and obviously you've seen 1 person come off the list from the Māori Party, who was their deputy. They have 2 co-leaders. One of them lost out. This was the female co-leader who was second on the list. She came in because the previous co-leader resigned, and the person who won their electorate, who was actually not that high up on the list, he has taken over because he actually won an electorate seat. So you can see how the list and the electorates sort of balance out and determine who gets in or who doesn't get in within the parties, even though it's the overall party vote that makes up the total seats that they get. So if I have confused you, I'm sorry, but I hope that makes a little bit of sense as to what happened with the special votes there.
Even more confusing than how the US election is being counted at the moment.
That's right. Well, we don't get extra boxes arriving after the vote is over. You know, when at 7 p.m. On Saturday was the 17th. You know, we knew all the votes that were there. We knew all the special votes that were there. You had a total tally of all the votes already. Whereas obviously in America, what they do is they, the UPS seems to deliver a few extra boxes of special ballots, the next day and the day after that and the day after that until they get the right result.
Well, these special votes obviously have come in 3 weeks later, which...
They've counted them 3 weeks later, but they all arrived before the election. So they were stacked away, sealed away in boxes and counted later. And you could go and observe that count if you wanted as an election scrutinizer, sort of scrutineer. Can't remember the exact term. Scrutineers, I believe. And yes, so they basically held on to them for 2 weeks before they decided to count them. But they were sealed away. It wasn't a case of them just arriving, in case anybody is confused.
Well, we had another state election in Australia on October the 31st, Halloween night, and well, for the right side of politics, it was definitely a spooky night with the re-election of the Palaszczuk Labor government with an increased majority, but they still haven't counted all the votes yet. 85.6% of the vote has been counted. This is nearly 2 weeks later. At the moment, the Labor Party has 50 seats out of 89. They're predicted to win one more. The Liberal National Party has 33. They're projected to win 35. Greens picked up an extra seat. They unseated the former Labor Deputy Premier Jackie Trad in South Brisbane. One Nation retained their sole seat, but they had a 6.6% swing against them. Most of that vote went back to the Labor Party because at this state election, the Labor Party is the party of closed borders. And One Nation was the party of open borders. I'll bet this was about a state border, not an international border. The Katter Party, not much change in their vote. They retain their 3 seats in central North Queensland, and no other party really got anywhere, not even Clive Palmer's United Australia Party.
So, yeah, but with only 85% of the vote counted 2 weeks after, it looks like you may be in a race to see who's slower counter then, because 2 weeks from now, I suspect will be, probably at least 86 or 87% counted in the US. So.
But it was a clear result on election night. Deb Frecklington, the LNP opposition leader, she's already stood down. There was you would say a miscoordination on Queensland election night, where normally the convention is, and it's the same in New Zealand, that the loser telephones the winner to concede, and then they make their concession speech, and then the victor gets up. But Anastasia Palaszczuk arrived, started speaking, and then Deb Frecklington showed up in the middle of her speech and started speaking herself. So there was this miscoordination, and which just basically summed up her campaign.
Certainly.
So that means that the New South Wales-Queensland border, while there's been a change in that anyone from New South Wales can now go into Queensland except the 32 local government areas in Greater Sydney, which still means there's a controlled border. So you still have to get a permit to go in, fill in a border declaration. And it's getting quite nasty between the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian and Anastasia Palaszczuk. It's been referred to as basically a Mean Girls fight because this was broke yesterday. Gladys Berejiklian lashes Anastasia Palaszczuk for text message about Queensland's state of origin win, because the state of origin between New South Wales and Queensland in rugby league was played at the Adelaide Oval. Queensland pulled off a surprise 18-14 victory. The big kerfuffle beforehand was the NRL decided they weren't going to play the national anthem beforehand. Then after backlash, they backflipped and said, yes, we are going to play it. But when it was played, the NRL players didn't sing it anyway. So, but...
So I just noticed the names. Is there a reason why both of the state governors there or premiers have like Turkish sounding names, or is it just a coincidence?
Palaszczuk is a Polish name, and Berejiklian is an Armenian name, and they're both the most successful female premiers in Australian history. Anastasia Palaszczuk has now won 3 elections. Gladys Berejiklian as she won her first in 2019, and she's in a very solid position. Even though there's been a lot of media, you would say, hyperventilation over the revelation that she had a relationship with former Liberal corrupt MP Darryl Maguire, it hasn't hindered her popularity. Because she's
voters don't care. They expect their politicians to be corrupt. And I was expecting you to come back and tell me they were Greek names, so I thought I'd make a good joke out of that one. But I suppose, at least in New Zealand anyway, I don't think we have large Eastern European populations, but I believe you do in New South Wales and Queensland. Is that correct, or is it just a coincidence?
Yeah, Melbourne has the biggest Greek population outside of Greece, but all the other Eastern European, Eurasian ethnicities, they're scattered all over the country. It seems that the precedent is to be a successful female premier, you've got to have a name that Anglo-Australians can't spell, because we always have to look it up. We've learned how to pronounce them, but not how to spell them.
You've been doing a pretty good job. You're still struggling with Ardern, Jacinda in New Zealand.
Yes, with
it's a difficult one for Anglo-Australians to pronounce as well.
Well, because we have obviously Jacinta Price here in Australia, conservative Indigenous activist, and then there's your Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and obviously, I know it sounds like a feeble excuse, but there's only 2 people we know of Jacinta. Obviously, we know the Australian Jacinta the most, so it's just easier to just remember one pronunciation.
Of course.
Yeah, but it was the New South Wales Liberal Party in 2019, knowing that Berejiklian was a mouthful, just had their slogan as Gladys and the New South Wales Liberal team.
That's a good one. I see here the comment here from Dr. Foster. You can't have a premier named Gladys, just as you can't have a composer named Bob. Yes, well, you would have thought so, but apparently Australia seems to have managed Gladys doing quite well.
Also, although this is politically incorrect to just even point out, both Gladys Berejiklian and Anastasia Palaszczuk are childless and currently single, so they are basically married to the job after her ex-boyfriend. Well, that she had an ex-boyfriend, and Darryl Maguire was revealed. Her PR team organized a feature in the Daily Telegraph where she said, "I've given up on love now. I really fell for him. I thought I was going to marry him, but yes." I think that's sort of why the public have rallied around her, because it's like, oh, you did have a guy, but he turned out to be a jerk, or you fell for the wrong guy, and she actually played on that.
Of course, yeah. Politicians can use any situation, any event to their advantage. Something that we have seen a lot of in the last few elections that we've had going on in New Zealand and Australia, and now that we're watching in America.
We've got a comment here from Dr. Foster, 1968. Does Tim really think anyone here is interested in what's happening in the New South Wales Liberal Party this week of all weeks? Well, this is a catch-up show, and everyone likes when two female politicians are having a catfight, and also sex scandals in politics everyone loves.
Don't worry, everyone. We will get around to the American politics soon, but we do have to cover the rest of.
This is still trad Tasman Talk, so we won't go across the Pacific Ocean until the end of the show. Or I've done 3 shows in the past 2 days based on US election.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's going to keep on going as well. Don't worry. There will be more US election results next week as well. I can guarantee it, and probably the week after that, and the week after that. So we will get plenty of US elections, there's plenty of interesting stuff to talk about there as well, and we will get around to the Q&A. I suppose.
I'll just finish off final thing about Gladys. Shows she texted Anastasia Palaszczuk on Sunday night, congratulating her on her re-election as Queensland Premier, and reiterated her desire to speak about the border closure in Sydney. But she didn't receive a reply until last night when Ms. Palaszczuk bragged about Queensland defeating New South Wales in the state of origin. She replied, "Queensland, a great game," or something to that effect, mysteriously, and said, "She didn't mention borders or thanks for the congratulations. I didn't know whether to be shocked or bemused, frankly." But the way things are panning out at the moment with the active coronavirus cases, there's more in New South Wales than there are in Victoria. This figure here on COVID Live also includes in hotel quarantine as well. But the new cases today were 4 in the community in New South Wales. They've got a new cluster, and we've had our 7th day of 0 here in Victoria. So the way things are going, Anastasia Palaszczuk might be opening the border to Victorians before Sydney-siders.
All they need to do is copy Dan Andrews and Jacinda Ardern's methods. The ultimate Wuhan CCP lockdown. It's the only way out. We can see that with Europe. Boris seems to have figured it out again, and Spain, and I believe France and Germany as well. You've got to go full CCP, full hardcore lockdown, and it's the only solution. The final cure to coronavirus is to go full scale lockdowns indefinitely. That's the lesson that they have to learn. That's the lesson China is going to teach them.
Yes, because now Gladys is she's basically going to be pilloried for her actual suppression strategy while keeping the economy open, because they've now gone in hospitality to a 4 square meter rule, and also increased home, outdoor, and protest gatherings there. No face masks in New South Wales, but because she is basically kept the joint open, which obviously means there's going to be outbreaks from time to time, and her government has managed them. Their health minister in New South Wales, Brad Hazzard, is managing the New World Order, as he put it, quite well.
I'm sure he is. Yeah. And it's interesting to know that in terms of border openings, there's been no real rush. While in New Zealand there have been a few more cases, it's basically disappeared from the news, as predicted in the last couple of weeks. COVID is old news. Everybody's moved on to something more exciting now, except the borders remain sealed shut, which is quite interesting. There's no rapid moves to really allow trans-Tasman transits. Flights are obviously going if you're willing to take the quarantine and the expense.
When you come back, you have to go into the quarantine camp, because that went viral worldwide.
So New Zealand's quarantine camps, which is interesting. The New Zealand media had run stories on these quarantine camps, and they'd investigated the quarantine camps several weeks ago or months ago now. And then as soon as the rest of the world started calling them quarantine camps, they had to start running defense for Jacinda Ardern. Like, oh, how dare you call them quarantine camps, when there are tons and tons of articles and video clips of them out there calling them quarantine camps. So.
Yeah, that I won't play it now, but basically has what's he, the chief health officer or Ashley Bloomfield?
Yes, Director General
of
Director General of Health.
That's what you call. Yeah, well, it has him describing the quarantine camps, and then Jacinda Ardern saying, "Well, if you refuse to get tested, we'll just keep you there for longer." So that's a pretty good. The way she said it, it reminded me of Dolores Umbridge in the Harry Potter movies, with just that demeanor. It's like, well, if you refuse to do this, then I'll just do this. Mm-hmm.
And that is definitely the attitude. I believe some of the Pacific Islands now, Rarotonga, or I believe it was Rarotonga or Fiji, possibly Fiji, basically straight up opened their borders to New Zealand to say, like, no quarantine, no fee, no nothing. Please come and spend money. Right, we're going bankrupt. Everybody's going to starve to death if this goes on for much longer. And yet, obviously, in New Zealand, it's we're closed borders. Nobody, and in fact, the New Zealand economy seems to be largely unaffected. Sorry, I did miss that message you put up on the screen there for Dr. Foster while I was talking.
Notice your books behind you.
Books behind me, over my shoulder, After America and America Alone. Also, it's the other way around. It's America Alone. It was the first one. After America is the sequel, I believe. And yes, they're good books from Mark Stein, and I suppose fairly fitting for what is going on and what we'll be talking about.
He wrote them, the first one about 15 years ago, then the other one 10 years ago.
And they hold up pretty well, except that everything is accelerated far beyond what he was predicting, sort of expecting things to take half a century, and we seem to have got there in a record amount of time. So.
And Islamist terror is back out onto the streets in Europe. The Islamists, with their beheadings and other attacks, don't seem to be obeying Europe's lockdown.
No, that's right. They, I believe ISIS put a little notice for them to avoid coronavirus for a while, but it seems that the coronavirus avoiding is over and it's back to jihad. So the narrative can shift back away. People can only handle so much COVID. I think ISIS has decided that it's time to put a little bit of jihad back into Europe.
Back to the future.
Yeah, exactly. All right. That was a nice little diversion. Let's get back to business. Certainly.
Yeah. So obviously, as you mentioned, the trans-Tasman bubble is one way, so New Zealanders can come here. But on their return,
there's still no real talk on that. They sort of said, maybe December, but there's just been radio silence after the election, sort of as predicted. It's, nobody cares anymore.
Dan Andrews today said that from 9th of November, Victoria will enter the trans-Tasman bubble, so they can start coming. Well, they've already come here, the New Zealanders, as we talked about on the last Trad-Tasman Talk.
I think we're going to see a lot of New Zealanders just because often we would see New Zealanders leave for Australia. We have a net outflow of New Zealanders to Australia. And now it's rather straightforward, right? New Zealand. If you're going to leave New Zealand, it's pretty easy to leave now for Australia and just not come back. I suspect we're going to be seeing a lot more of that in the coming months.
So why would you still want to come to Victoria, given even though we have gone a week with no new cases, we are still living. Melburnians are separated from regional Victorians. We still have the 25-kilometre radius in Melbourne that will be lifted from Monday. The Ring of Steel will be coming down the 9th of November, fitting date. Given that's when the Berlin Wall came down, and Dan Andrews beginning last Friday, it was his 120th press conference in a row. He took the Melbourne Cup long weekend off. He arrived back on Wednesday, but he's ditched the purple coronavirus press conference backdrop. He returned Wednesday from a four-day extended weekend to the Werribee Zoo, and today he was at the Metro Tunnel today as well. So obviously with Dan Andrews, everything's coordinated. So that's basically to signify to the people, yes, I'm still keeping you updated, but more things can happen now. But he's told us that coronavirus is still lurking around. We've got he's still got his mask fetish. He didn't like on Melbourne Cup long weekend. People are at the beach with no mask, no social distancing in the 30-degree heat. And he called the Melbourne Cup Day anti-lockdown protesters shameful. The Victoria Police kettled all of them and dragged them out one by one, all 400, processed and fined them all. And obviously, because it was a hot day, a lot of the protesters were thirsty. So the Victoria Police, they got a bucket from one of the local pubs and got reusable disposable cups and dipped in the cup to give to them, which doesn't sound very COVID safe. Everyone drinking from the same. There was some confusion that it was the same. It was the same bucket that the horses drink from, but that wasn't accurate. But yes, but it's still.
This is fine. This is normal. This is a normal day in police state Melbourne, and you're seeing all of the scenes that we had been seeing out of Melbourne. Now you can see in the UK with their new lockdown starting. The videos are already coming out again.
Although
of the
theirs is definitely more. I would say the UK lockdown. The first one was very cruel, but this one is even crueler than Melbourne's, given that if you can still, most nursing homes and hospitals, you can still have COVID safe limited visits, but in the UK, they've basically locked all of the elderly, not allowed to see families since March, which is...
It's absolutely inhumane and brutal. Even the and I had a post from one of our regular watchers who I don't believe is here tonight because I don't see him in the chat, but he basically posted saying, are we really free here? You're probably better off in the, at least compared to the UK, for instance, you're much better off in under communist Chinese rule. The CCP will treat you much nicer.
Well, you'll get treated much nicer than Dan. There's been no police chase for taking your elderly mother out outside for some fresh air. No,
certainly not.
But it's just a 4-week lockdown. Boris Johnson has said.
When it all began, it's just 4 weeks, guys. It's not 4 weeks.
And I'm not sure, I haven't heard any news about the Welsh lockdown, where they adopted some of the measures of the New Zealand lockdown because non-essential books in New Zealand were prohibited. So Wales, they've boarded up a whole bunch of what the bureaucrats deem non-essential items.
Terrible. Oh, good. All right. Any final border disputes in Australia, or are we ready to move on?
Well, we had, as I describe it today, basically a court decision dump because we had the High Court hand down its verdict on Clive Palmer's challenge to the WA's hard border, and he lost, but the High Court's decision or ruling was very limited. They said that the WA's Public Health Act was not unconstitutional, They didn't. That's all they ruled on. So it wasn't about any state border closures. It was just about the WA Public Health Act you might have seen around the internet. That's the one that says they can force vaccinate people with respect, including removing their underwear. But WA on the 14th of November is relaxing its hard border it's going to be a controlled border from November 14th, where everyone except Victorians and New South Welsh people will be allowed free travel. I'll be able to...
Everybody except you lot over there can move around.
I will still be able to go, but we have to quarantine for 14 days at a suitable location and then compulsory coronavirus test on day 11. Because, yes, WA, they love the compulsory stuff there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We also had the High Court dismiss a challenge to Victoria's lockdown. So this was brought by Mornington Peninsula hotelier Julian Gurner. He was represented by Brett Walker, QC. They tried to argue there was an implied constitutional right to freedom of movement. The High Court said that there was no such
no
implied right. No. And we also had
have your High Court determine
the hotel quarantine interim report, the Board of Inquiry into Victoria's hotel quarantine program. We had the Peter Credlin documentary on Sky News Sunday night, Deadly Decisions. The full report about who's to blame for hiring the private security guards won't be delivered until December the 21st, 4 days before COVID normal Christmas. So this report basically has here, I'm just skimming through it, what's needed to, what control should be in place to resume a hotel quarantine program. And it mentions sensible things like having one department responsible, a hotel quarantine, basically a board which oversees everything, like so having a proper chain of command, Victoria Police constantly being outside of the hotel quarantine. It also says, because there is a trend to reintroduce home quarantine, given how expensive hotel quarantine is, it suggests that that can take place if with the appropriate people, and suggests maybe ankle bracelets can be used.
Good stuff.
But obviously with this second wave that we had in Melbourne with so many active cases, most of those infected quarantined at home. They were checked up on by members of Victoria Police and Australian Defence Force. As far as I know, there were no breaches of that recently, so at least that worked well at the end there. I mean, the active cases are now down to 15, and there's been no breaches of isolation of the active cases that have remained, and they're still testing around 20,000 people per day. They're not finding the needle in a haystack anymore. The one case out of 20,000, not even a false positive, which we were getting a few there. So yeah, looking very good on that front. But if coronavirus is still lurking, as Dan Andrews said, well, I guess their only option is to start. Is to start testing the sewerage, the poo and the shit.
Yeah, that's absolutely, yeah. We had the case exactly here in New Zealand still, where they're, as I mentioned almost every time, they still have not truly determined where the mystery last cluster came from. Anyway, we know.
Your wife, Amy, has congratulated me on my haircut. Yes, the lockdown locks are gone because the hairdressers are open now.
That is something we had forgotten to do, but indeed, I was wondering what would look different, but I never noticed haircuts, as Amy can attest to. So, good job on the haircuts there. Yes, I suspect that there must have been long queues and bookings, unless a lot of people had been getting illegal barbers over the lockdown.
Well, I booked into a barber when they opened, and of course, men men need they don't need much time to get their haircut. It's just a simple thing, and barber is exclusively for men, so I only had to wait a week for an appointment. Some female hair salons, they had to wait a month, and if you went into one of those walk-in hairdressers, you would have had to wait outside for hours because of social distancing.
Yeah, I'm sure. Crazy.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, sorry, carry on. All yours.
Yeah. It was interesting the day after the US election, we had an announcement from Scott Morrison that Australia had locked in 2 new coronavirus vaccine candidates, 50 million doses. So we already locked in the Oxford vaccine, which it's just been announced it could be on the same day, could be ready before Christmas, and also University of Queensland one. That's the 2 we already had locked in here. They're actually going to start manufacturing these 2 vaccines before they're actually approved by the Therapeutic Goods Administration.
Well, that sounds really promising. I hope that, and I mean, we did this thing in New Zealand as well. We paid 50 million for various of these vaccines, but they're never going. I still maintain, I will hold that belief. They are not going to arrive. There is not going to be the miracle COVID vaccine unless it's something incredibly ineffective that they just have to rush out there to make the thing go away and make people believe everything's okay and go back to normal. But I can echo Clarky's comment in the chat there with regards to you paid for that, Australia, for those vaccines, but in this case she's referring to your haircut, Tim. I suspect that the barbers were just rushing people through, Tim. I don't know if that's if that's a high quality haircut or not, or your barber is being insulted.
Oh well, I was satisfied with it. I paid top dollar for it.
How much the illegal black market haircuts were going for during lockdown?
I don't know. I do know that they were taking place. There was speculation that Dan might have had one, but he just said he just did. He now says that after his holiday break, where he appeared back on Wednesdays, I had a proper, thorough legal haircut now.
Very good.
Also, I forgot to mention what else has been happening in Victoria is that the operators of Melbourne's Victoria's Metro and V-Line trains we're discovering have been quite corrupt. IBAC, our anti-corruption body, has been hearing that
like our orphan trains.
Yes, both the V-Line and Metro trains directors had been basically receiving kickbacks, and this TransClean group, they were cleaning the trains during the pandemic, but weren't cleaning them COVID safe, not properly. So this is the headline here. Metro manager asks TransClean for a little bit of honey. So this is sort of like movie stuff. Like IBAC has got
the footage of are always better than the movie scripts.
Yes,
it's always the case. People wouldn't believe it if they made a movie about it. That's why it has to be real life.
And so since we're discovering what's been going on with this corruption with the train operations and how Unified Security got the $30 million hotel quarantine contract in less than 24 hours, went on the government's approved tender list, what else is dodgy with this government and contracts? If it's, even though we're out of the on the way out of the lockdown and the pandemic, there's going to be a lot more scrutiny on the Andrews government's contracts.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Well, the Shall we look? We had a little look through the New Zealand elections already, but we have also had referendum results come in through. Even today came the final results. We had the preliminary results last week, and we have just enough time to go through this now. Let me bring those up. I realized I didn't have them.
Yeah, I've got them here.
Okay, well, that's helpful.
Yeah, so you had, I'll allow you to talk through the referendum results.
So just to refresh the Australians, we had two referendums at the election time. We had assisted suicide referendum, and we had a cannabis referendum. And the assisted suicide referendum was pretty much guaranteed to pass, had about 60 or so percent support in many of the polls. Finished up, as you can see there, 65% for, only 34 against. And it allows anyone to who's assessed to be within 6 months of dying and is aged over 18. So if they've got some kind of condition where they reckon they'll be dead in 6 months, or at least 2 doctors will certify that, then they can get a lethal injection. That's sort of the gist of the bill, which had very big, broad support here in New Zealand. Somewhat ironic, obviously, during the middle of a pandemic, but the ultimate, ultimately it comes together in, the idea, or at least the fear of death, and sort of assisted suicide ties into at least the strict lockdown measures as well, in that way that as long as death can be controlled, as long as the way people are dying is not too random, it's not too sort of pain. What's the word they always use? Suffering.
Dying with dignity.
Yeah, so they call it dying with dignity. So if there's not too much suffering, then it's okay. So as long as it's nicely managed and clinically clean, then everything is approved. And so that's sort of, I believe that's a large push behind it. Is if you were talking to people who supported this, it was really a case of they wanted to be in control at the end of their life. They didn't want to have to suffer, and they wanted to be able to end their life quickly and smoothly. And essentially that was the ticket to avoid suffering. And and ultimately, I predicted this would sort of go down religious lines, which it almost did. If you compare, people who are at least nominally Christian against those who are not, then you'd get to about a 40-60. And on top of that, obviously, you had a lot of liberal, left-leaning Christian leaders supporting it as well, because they ultimately lost sight of their sort of, at least the biblical worldview there, that your life is not owned by yourself. That was the Christian worldview, the predominant worldview up until very, very recently. And I think in this referendum, you can really see where that's changed. And it's essentially two different worldviews. Either you own your own life or you don't own your own life. And that's where you can see the really, really big shift has occurred there. And that's what I think is really behind this referendum. Obviously, we're already seeing a push for widening it. For instance, people with degenerative diseases are already complaining that this doesn't give them the ability to end their life. For instance, if you've got motor neurons or Huntington's and so on.
Which is how it's headed in Belgium and the Netherlands.
But that's where
that's where it has to go. Home of euthanasia.
Yeah, and then that's obviously where it has to go to next. Already now, the next set of people are complaining that they're not going to fit within the criteria. So it goes on like that. Yeah.
And the other referendum,
and the cannabis one, which is somewhat surprising, or at least it was widely polled not to pass. Narrow margins here. Just shy of 51% against, with 48% supporting it. The reason this failed is because the Yes campaign ran like a really terrible campaign, basically just appealing to dope smokers. And people, generally speaking, don't really like potheads. So if it was basically, this is good for potheads, is not really a very convincing argument. And that was ultimately what it came down to, because if you can pass an assisted suicide referendum, you can pass a cannabis referendum. It was just purely down to the lack of campaigning that they ran. And the No campaign actually quite cleverly tied onto the smoke-free target. So New Zealand is a smoke-free 2025, 2050, 2030, whatever number they keep changing. But they essentially have a smoke-free target, and that was utilized quite heavily. And because the government has said that, the No campaign was able to utilize that quite heavily to say, hey, there's a contradiction here. You're going to be legalizing smoking a different substance when you're trying to campaign for people to stop smoking another substance. So that's why that kind of went meh, because you basically had, greenie, sort of the Greens and dope smokers, potheads were wanting yes. And you had a bit of a sensible argument for no, so that went pretty flat. I suspect that this parliament, our ultra progressive parliament, will actually use some of their political capital to at least decriminalize cannabis and perhaps other drugs as well.
Because it's not binding, these referendums.
No, this one is not binding. So I shouldn't have noted, the first one was binding. For our Australian audience, again, the end of life choice bill, or the assisted suicide, that was binding. The bill had been passed. It now goes into law. It will not go into effect for another 12 months, though, because they actually need to go and find doctors who will sign up to do it. And doctors actually campaigned heavily against it. So a lot of those no votes, obviously, were doctors. They
always campaigned their medical bodies against euthanasia.
Medical bodies campaigned against it very strongly, because they're not the ones who want to have to go around killing people because they're doctors. So they're going to.
That's against their Hippocratic oath.
Exactly, obviously. So that they're going to be finding enough doctors, basically building a registry of enough doctors who throughout the country in the right places, so they can euthanize people on request. And they know which doctors to go to. That's essentially why it's taking. What is it? Sorry, I totally derailed my train of thought here while looking at the comments.
We'll move on to, because the lead to legalize both medicinal and recreational cannabis has come from the United States. And while we don't know who's going to be president, this is from Reason.com, a libertarian blog and magazine in the US. Their headline is, on election night, the real winner was drugs. And it says here, drugs are winning the war on drugs, because ballot measures making marijuana legal for recreational purposes passed in 3. Arizona, Montana, and New Jersey. South Dakota approved both recreational and medicinal marijuana. So New Zealand is more conservative than the US states of Arizona, Montana, and South Dakota.
Certainly, and I think it came down to campaigning, and obviously perhaps a more something focused towards decriminalizing, focusing towards individual liberty, which obviously America and especially American conservatives are fairly strong on. And you had none of that in New Zealand. There was not really any of this campaigning for, hey, this is actually about, should people have the liberty to do this? Should people not go to jail? It was none of that. It was basically like, hey, I like to relax and smoke weed.
Yeah, weed. That sounded like the slogan.
That was a do weed. Yeah, you basically get stoned. Like vote yes to get stoned. And that was not a way to go. That was not the way to sell it to people who were not at all interested in doing and actually getting stoned. And obviously they didn't even try to campaign from the perspective of, hey, let's not get people into prison. Let's not get people criminal records. All of these are like, I could have run the campaign for them. I was publicly opposed to it officially, but yet I'm pretty sure I could have done a better job of running their campaign. And obviously they did have a bit more effort put into it in America there.
And in the District of Columbia, which is Washington, D.C., and in the state of Oregon, which takes in the city of Portland, the birthplace of and home of Antifa, they legalized magic mushrooms there. So they already had legalized recreational marijuana there, moving on to magic mushrooms now.
cocaine as well, I believe. So there you go.
Well,
if you're Hunter Biden's just moved to Oregon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure what effect that'll have on the Antifa riots there. I mean, obviously, those Antifa rioters, they haven't been smoking enough weed to basically be immobile.
One of the big arguments against it is like, well, everybody's going to get stoned, but clearly not enough people have been getting stoned in Oregon. So that's in Portland, clearly not working. So we shall see what happens. But here in New Zealand, no change, essentially. I do see Dr. Foster asking about the vote and delaying the vote. There was no change in the actual outcome for special votes in New Zealand. So, yeah, I don't know why they took 2 or 3 weeks to count them, but there was no actual change in the outcome. So,
even though the progressives didn't get their wish on marijuana, they're quite pleased about the world's most diverse cabinet.
That's right. We have the gayest parliament in the world, which we may have which we haven't gone into on the show. So they've announced that we've got 11 queer MPs. About 9% of our parliament is now diverse, apparently. In case you're of any doubt at all what diversity means, I've got a list here that I can read out to you. So it was incredibly diverse because it has 5 Māori, 8 women, 3 homosexuals, and 2 Polynesians. And that's what makes cabinet diverse. As you may have realized, there's a few things missing from that, and I've written it down here. They haven't mentioned that they've got 13 Pakeha or European New Zealanders. They haven't mentioned they've got 12 men or that they've got 17 heterosexuals. So just to be clear, diverse means not talking about white people, about men or straight. So straight white men are excluded, and straight white men is what makes your cabinet undiverse.
And your new foreign minister.
We're not even talking about equal representation, et cetera, right? The so-called queer LGBTQA, A, B, C, D, E, F, G part of the population is like maybe 1% at best, probably a small fraction of 1%, even though they are growing it rapidly through their indoctrination. Their conversion therapy techniques are growing their LGBT population in the education systems, but they're still somewhere well below 1%. So if you've got basically 1 in 10 of your parliamentarians being queer, you're not really talking about diversity or equality anymore. Yes, somebody mentioning here at my workplace today, there was a meeting just for Pacific Island staff members. Yeah, exactly. And we're getting more and more of that segregation in New Zealand. And you can see that talk in America as well. It comes from their critical race theory. Basically, segregation is good, they've realized, after complaining about racism for so on. It would
the safe spaces for people of color.
Yeah, basically. So back to segregation. I wonder what would happen if I proposed a meeting that was just for quote unquote white staff members, from Dr. Foster again. Well, what would happen is that you'd be racist, and 2, that's the normal staff meetings. The normal staff meetings are actually for the white staff members, and their presence is what excludes the others, apparently. That's what they'll tell you if you were to ask them. I'll save you the trouble. But obviously diverse just straight up means not white. Although the category for whiteness is growing very quickly in America. I don't know, people have seen the stats around increased support, especially among Cubans and Hispanics. Or
Cubans. Cubans are white now. Enrique Tarrio, the chairman of the Proud Boys, he's now white, apparently.
Yeah. They've all been kicked out. So the Cubans have been kicked out of the people of color club. Hispanics have been kicked out as well, even though they were always Spanish. They were always white anyway. It's now official. It's now very much official that they are a part of the white club. So
because they delivered Florida for Trump convincingly.
Absolutely. So essentially, if you This is what I think we'll see in New Zealand as well. It's interesting they split off Pacific Islanders. I think you'll see Pacific Islanders play more of that kind of Hispanic Cuban role in New Zealand in the future. I think that's a very likely possibility, and they'll probably get to be excluded from being special people soon enough. But it's just a matter of time. Obviously, the larger the oppressed groups of people grow, the more that they have to kick out, because it's got to be an exclusive club. Like if everybody is special, then nobody is special. They can't have any of that. Sorry if you can hear explosions in the background. That's not because Jacinda has enacted martial law. It's just Guy Fawkes wrapping up today.
Yes, because it was Guy Fawkes night overnight.
Yeah, we had a lot of rain, so I think, and obviously it's Friday today, so people keep going for a couple of days when it's the weekend.
Yeah, remember the 5th of November. Now, with your diverse parliament, there's a diverse cabinet now. Grant Robertson, the new deputy prime minister, he is gay, and your Maori foreign minister, well, you had a Maori foreign minister before with Winston Peters. He's out of the parliament now, but you might be able to pronounce her name better, but she's got a facial tattoo.
That's right. I've got the okay, I haven't tried to pronounce her name before, so I'm not going to do much better than you, I think. Nanaia Mahuta. I believe Mahuta is at least correct. So she has a moko, which is a face which is a tattoo, and a columnist and author, Olivia Pearson, who writes for the BFD, as well as I do. She mentioned that facial tattoos are ugly and uncivilized. And the big retailer, online retailer in New Zealand, Mighty Ape, has pulled her books. Although she has tweeted out saying she didn't even know they were selling her book. So it wasn't like she noticed. And I'm guessing she's had a lot of book sales since they've written this article from her various other outlets. But yeah, there's obviously going to be something interesting. At least there have been internationally some interesting reactions to this as well, obviously, because generally speaking, many cultures actually very heavily frown on tattoos. And often they, Europeans used to do tattoos and things as well, but that was a long time ago. And I think, in general, people associated with, gangs or incredibly primitive behavior. Whether or not this will cause an issue on the international stage, we don't know. It is certainly accepted in New Zealand now, but I think a few years ago, a comment like this would not have raised any eyebrows at all. You go back 2 or 3 years, this would not have been an unpopular opinion. I think it just kind of goes to show how quickly the secular orthodoxy changes and how you need to quickly pick up your views or they will kick you out. And in this case, obviously, in New Zealand's case especially, it was the arrival of Christianity that saw the removal of tattoos, which is why this is essentially becomes a repudiation of Christianity.
Katie Hopkins, she was one of the leading anti-tattoo commentators, saying that she wouldn't hire people with tattoos or were too fat as well. Yes.
Well, she obviously has been cancelled for that now as well. So yes. A dangerous place to go there. Yeah, certainly.
Which is why she was.
By the way, if we've got any questions or super chats, we'll go on for a little bit longer and send things through. But we have largely wrapped up a lot of New Zealand and Australia stuff, and we've touched on a number of a number of American topics as well. We are still, I think, on the whole, a question that I could ask myself is, where do I think the US election is going? And interestingly, on the night, I was looking at the results come in. I saw Florida come in, which we already mentioned. Huge delivery for Trump. And as dysfunctional as the American election counting is, it's not all of America. And if people remember the 2000 election, which I certainly don't, because I'm too young for that, but Florida was famous for not being able to count votes. Right? That's what stuffed up.
Or they're with their it's called the hanging chads and their butterfly ballots, which confused things. There wasn't voter fraud. It was just that incompetence.
Yeah, and they tidied it up. I mean, you saw Florida; they were the first to come in. They were the first to report big wins for Trump, no problem. I thought, well, that's it. The night is basically over at this point. Trump will repeat that up and down the country, which he did. He was ahead hugely in all of these states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And I thought, well, that's it, right? Basically, at this point, I said at the end to a couple of the guys I was with, I said, it's over because, I mean, they have suddenly stopped counting the votes. But even if all the remaining votes are like 90% Biden, like they'd have to be like 90% Biden, if they're gonna turn this, right? Which is not going to happen. Ha ha, very funny. And then
close to 100% Biden.
Then you come back the next day, and indeed, it is in fact that close to 100% of these remaining votes are going to Biden. They're finding more and more ballots. They're finding boxes of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of ballots that are suddenly turning up overnight the next day. Even today, several hours before the show, they're still reporting like, oh, we found another 20,000 votes in Georgia that just turned up on the doorstep. And that's dysfunctional election. And I didn't see that coming. I didn't really see it coming, where I thought, yeah, they're not going to just, it's too obvious, right? To say, okay, well, we know. I
suspected that because I don't think many Trump voters are going to vote mail-in voting, particularly since he's railed against it. And Trump voters aren't that scared of the coronavirus that they think that mail-in voting is going to save them from getting infected in the voting center.
No, certainly not. But in many other states, especially the ones that counted their mail-in ballots first, right, instead of having them turn up the next day, they had them obviously there because you've got all your mail, you've got all of these postal votes sitting there ready to go, counting them on the day. As you'll see in the comments here, 120-year-olds are voting. Obviously, the registers, voting registers that we're seeing in, I think Michigan is where a lot of those were coming from. There's a lot of shenanigans going on there. Whether it's on a huge scale is going to become incredibly hard to verify properly. And that's why this will drag on and on, probably. But you see these other states I was talking about, they had no trouble counting their postal votes, and they were not 90% Biden. They were not 100% Biden, their postal votes.
Or they were just all counted.
Some of them were counting them first. Like Arizona counted postal ballots first, mail-in ballots, and they were only 60 to 70% Biden. And then they counted in-person votes. Texas was blue early on. Why? Because they actually counted a lot of their postal votes early as well. And that's the similar thing we did in New Zealand as well. It wasn't postal votes, it was early votes. And we counted all of those early as well, if you remember, on the election night. That's the standard thing to do. Coincidentally, it's these three states, or 3 or 4 states, and including Georgia too, that basically Democrats knew they could swing, right? That was the end of Trump's path to victory. They're the ones that suddenly stopped counting. They're the ones that didn't have their postal votes. They're the ones that get all their they're finding their postal votes now 2 or 3 days later. And that's not how an election goes. Somebody said Georgia just went to Trump by 601 votes.
We can do a live update here.
I have not seen it. Again, they're just coming in, right? But you're saying, oh, well, Georgia's
this is the Fox News map. Fox News, they were the only ones to call Arizona for Biden. At the moment, they've counted 90%. Biden is ahead by 46,000 votes. That's where there's been protests outside the voting centers in Arizona, and Alex Jones has traveled from Texas to join them there, which is always quite. He makes a grand entrance, turning up in a de facto military tank wherever he goes. But let's have a look at Georgia here. Yes, there is less than 600 votes in it with 99% reporting. Fox hasn't called North Carolina yet. They've seemed to have stopped voting there. Trump is ahead by 40.
No, I saw today that they had found another 40,000 votes in Georgia, right? Like they had just been like, oh, sorry guys, we've got another 40,000 ballots here to open up, right? And so, where this will go is hard to tell. And the question, because if it goes to the courts, I don't think Trump necessarily wins that, because especially the his Supreme Court justices will have to prove their loyalty to the system.
Pennsylvania, Trump. It was almost a dead heat in Pennsylvania, but Trump has actually got a bit more now. So he's leading by 18,000 votes. North Carolina, they've still got a few more votes to count. Nevada, they've still only counted 84%.
So they've picked up a couple more. I think
12,000 votes, the difference, yeah.
Yes,
but they already called Wisconsin for Biden, who's ahead by, that'll be a recount there.
Yeah,
20,000 votes.
In Michigan a long time
Michigan,
ago.
yeah, Biden's ahead by 145,000 votes.
Again, they had, they had in the middle of the night somebody accidentally enter an error in the system at 4:00 in the morning when nobody was supposed to be counting votes. On and on and on it goes, right? If you deliberately want to make it look like you're stealing an election, that's the kind of behavior that you do, right? They deliberately set themselves up to not be able to run a proper election. Those states in particular, and I see here that Origin has just arrived in the chat asking about Bush v. Gore. I very briefly talked about Bush v. Gore when I was talking about Florida actually being able to count its votes on time. Right? They were the first ones to count their votes. They learned from their incompetency in 2000. I would have to say that if in 2020. In supposedly the world superpower in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, if you can't run an electoral system, you have to assume that it's due to malevolence.
They have 50 different electoral bodies.
But 50. There are 50 other countries. Even third world dictatorships in the middle of Africa, they can count their votes in a day because it's not very hard for them to do because it's all for the same person. Doing now, saying that 90%, trying to convince people that 90 to 100% of these mail-in ballots from that came in the day after the election were for Joe Biden. I don't believe that. I don't think that you're never going to convince the other half of the country that was legit, especially when the postal votes in other parts of the country were about 2-1. Right, it was about 70%, 70-30, 60-40. To Joe Biden. That was the edge in postal votes in these other places.
And the rest remember Trump, his election night speech, he said, we don't want them to find 100,000 votes at 4:00 in the morning and add them to the total, which is what happened.
Which is exactly what they did. Obviously, I mean, you can guess the script at this point, I guess. So yeah,
but. Yeah, let's have a look at because it hasn't been.
I mean, Trump won on the night. He won big. His leads were massive, and the fact that they had to wait for him to win, they were not going to allow a repeat of 2016 when they weren't ready for this. They had 4 years to set themselves up in those states, especially Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. They were ready to not have the votes counted on the night so they could drag it out. Right? They intentionally were not ready to have the votes counted, and other states were, right? So that's it.
Yeah, it was just those swing states which have Democrat governors and attorney generals.
And so I think Trump is right to go hardcore on the corruption system. Whether he can fix it, whether he can win it, I don't know. But even if he's ousted, if Trump is ousted, he can do his revenge. In 2020, 2022, 2024, I don't think it's over for the Trump family, especially Don Jr. has been.
But the Republican establishment, they'll want to retake the party.
I don't think so because it was a big win. And this is another thing that factors into Trump's victory. They had made big gains in the House. They have held on to the Senate unless the Democrats still manage to steal that. There was no blue wave. Trump did not negatively affect down ballot. Republicans are picking up state legislatures as well. On the whole, the Republican Party is incredibly healthy. In fact, more healthy now after 4 years of Trump than it was before. But they're doing better with all of these minority voters that they were claiming they were trying to court. We're trying so hard to get Trump did better than so many of these previous Republicans. Obviously, the establishment hate him, not because they necessarily care about winning, but good luck trying to convince good luck to them trying to retake the party, even if Trump is ousted, by this coup. He could be. I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think his family's going anywhere, and I think he's still going to be. It's still going to be the Trump Republican Party, whatever happens.
The only demographic that Trump went backwards in was with white men.
With white, exactly. So the 4 years of propaganda of calling white men racist apparently seems to have worked only with white men, though.
Yes,
obviously. The rest,
yeah, they're all members of Antifa.
well, basically, who knows what happened there, or whether that's just all the fraudulent ballots are just registered to white men. That could also be the problem.
Oh well,
other than that, he did incredibly well with all of these groups that they called him racist for 5 years in total. Probably the Republicans were going to get wiped out with minorities. That's what they were saying, and instead, that is not what happened. Instead, you've seen the opposite, and you've seen a healthier Republican Party under Donald Trump, and a lot of people have opened their eyes. I started doing commentary because of Donald Trump. So he's changed not just America, not just the Republican Party, not just America, but the whole world has been changed in a profound way, and that's not going anywhere, even if they oust him now.
Well, obviously, he lost votes amongst white males in Michigan's in the over 100s categories.
Yeah, well, definitely. That was his worst demographic by far.
But if you ever look at this is the projected electoral college
at least all those voters must remember Joe Biden from their school days. That's probably what gave it the edge.
So Joe Biden is on 264. This is with Arizona still called for him. So if he wins Nevada, that gives him 270, which is
that's what they're hoping for. Yeah, they want to declare Nevada before anything else comes through, and they can declare him the winner and go on from there. But there are a lot of other games that can still be played. I think the entertainment side of this is going to go on for another month or two. So if you're feeling nervous right now, stop feeling nervous, because this is just the beginning. You gotta be able to run this out for at least another month or 2 months. The show will go on. So you need to think about this more from an entertainment perspective at this point, because that's basically what it's going to descend into.
It's not a tragedy. The election result, it's a comedy.
It's a comedy. So that's what you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to live with the fact that Donald Trump won on the night. He won big, and that the system, the cathedral, as a friend of mine likes to call it, is striking back, and he may not necessarily survive that, but he also will not be truly beaten. He's not going anywhere.
And despite the fact that mainstream media, big tech, all the corporates were,
and the Chinese unleashed the COVID-19 just for this, maybe, in the end, allowing the Democrats to use universal mail-in ballots seems to be the big outcome of coronavirus. So I don't know if that was the long game the Chinese were playing, but that's certainly what's happened.
Well, it allowed them to take Hong Kong in the middle of 2020, and there's speculation during this lame duck period they might try to take Taiwan as well. But despite all the coordinated efforts against Trump, Biden looks like only just falling over the line, which is hardly, despite all of that, to brainwash the public.
They threw literally everything and then some at him, and he's still standing. Standing. Everything. Yeah. Right. The whole kitchen sink. They even burnt Fox News to the ground. Right. They turned Fox News into a laughingstock and probably destroyed at least half of Fox News audience. As far as I can see it, Fox News is going to struggle to recover from this. And I certainly hope that they don't.
There's the speculation that if Trump loses, there'll be Trump TV to...
Exactly. If Trump loses, he will burn the rest of what's left of Fox News to the ground. But that's it. They threw everything at him, and they still lost in the grand scheme of things. I mean, this is a big loss for them, even if, like I said, Trump is ousted from the White House. This is not a win for them. This is definitely not a win for the Democrat Party, for Joe Biden. It's not a win for the big tech, although perhaps, big tech always wins, but it's just certainly not a win for the media either.
And if you look at the popular vote, which of course doesn't matter, it's the highest voter turnout. Biden has 73.5 million votes at the moment, which is 50.5% of the popular vote. Trump has 69,600,000, which is 47.9. Trump has actually got more votes than Obama did when he first got elected. It's just that Biden has gained the most votes ever.
Yeah. And so to say that, so basically after 4 to 5 years of calling Donald Trump a fascist leader, literally Hitler, 48% of the country, highest, or minus Biden, second highest vote, popular vote ever in U.S. history. That is they cannot spin that as a win. And you're even seeing, for instance, in the Democrat Party, you're seeing threatening of the knives coming out for Nancy Pelosi. You're seeing, good luck to them holding that together with the radical left and the kind of moderate.
Yeah, because the squad, they all got reelected.
Yeah, exactly. And they could not genuinely take down Trump, even with everything stacked against him. They had to cheat to get to, if they finally get themselves across the line, that was it. And that's, I've got to wrap up. Basically, got to wrap up the show now. That was my big election rant.
Yeah, you had a lot to get off your chest.
Yeah. There'll be more. This is it. This is the beginning, guys. Strap in. This is the beginning. We'll be back talking about this next week.
But of course, the only unrest is going to come from the radical left, because as you've seen with the pro-Trump protests outside the Arizona voting centers, they've been 100% peaceful.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
well behaved.
Yeah, I had to laugh at the Philadelphia rallies, count every vote. So you can protest in public to count every vote. Oh, but you had to vote.
Yeah, you had to vote with your mail. Yeah, too dangerous because of Corona. Exactly right. It's a fraud. It's a scam. It's a sham. And I'm glad I can see through it now. That's the big thing to thank Trump for. And if you're watching the show as well, you can see the truth now. And that's something you should be thankful for.
All right, we'll wrap it up now. We will be back next week, although myself, I'm planning to, now that election season's over, scale back my shows. So I'll be back to just Wilm's Front on Wednesday evenings and Uncomfortable's Thursday evenings, and of course Trad Tasman Talk on Fridays. I might go into a hibernation period over the COVID normal summer, which is a bit of a reverse because most people hibernated during the lockdown, but of course I was on the air because there was so much to cover. But obviously I'm just hibernating from the screen, but I definitely feel like I need a bit of a break. Good to take a bit of a break over summer. I encourage people as well. It's spend time with your families and do all the gardening and all of this. Go out and go to the beach, etc. Enjoy life. Read some more books. Obviously, for us making the shows and writing articles, a bit more work goes into it for us. But I'm certainly looking forward to taking a break over Christmas. But it will be good until then. So we'll have at least 4 or 5 more shows for then. Well, you're already in the Hawaiian shirt for summer. I
am. That's right. It's summertime. It's actually quite warm, even though we've not had it's been very humid. I think it's going to be very, very humid summer for us. We had a lot of rain yesterday, which was nice. Yeah. We're still officially in drought mode here in Auckland. The permanent global warming drought.
I bet you're coronavirus free again.
Oh yeah, definitely. For now, well, not quite. There's still always cases lingering, but then nobody talks about them anymore. So it's not really. We're technically still free.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. On our return, we'll be back same time next Friday night, where we might have a clearer picture on the US election result.
Don't count on it.
Yeah, and we'll see. Obviously, because there's a lot of people saying that the coronavirus pandemic will end on November 4th. We'll see just how much coronavirus is in the news next week, because we've got another Dan decision day on Sunday about relaxing restrictions. He's becoming now a victim of his own success, Dan Andrews, because he has to follow his own roadmap. So we have to move to the last step, pretty much on the 9th, which allows for larger private and outdoor gatherings. And if we keep going without any more coronavirus cases for the next 2 weeks, that's when the New South Wales border opens on November 23rd. You'll have to go to COVID normal, which is basically everything is back to normal except surveillance, which is, of course, contact tracing, where you got to sign in to everywhere, or QR codes.
Yeah, same thing in New Zealand. We're still on heightened emergency levels where the police have wonderful powers that they haven't used yet. But we shall see. Well, that's it for tonight. We did go well over time, but it was a big catch-up show that we had, and we had to do a big. I promised people a big U.S. election spiel at the end of it, which I hope I delivered on a little bit. So, good night to you all, and we'll see you next Friday at 8 p.m. New Zealand time or 6 p.m. Melbourne time.
Have a good weekend.
Stay safe, stay free.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Trad Tasman Talk. To keep up with the latest real news and analysis from the Tasman nations, visit theunshackled.net and rightminds.nz.
Oh, and we've just got a super chat right at the end, a post-show super chat from Clark He, one of our regular viewers, US $15. Thank you so much, Clark, here on our return. It's certainly not over in regard to the US election. Cheers. Good to have Trad Tasman Talk back together. Yes, it's good to be back.
It is good to be back. See you for real. Farewell. See you next week for real now.